Hi everybody, welcome to my basic video on Blender 2.81. That's the version I'm using at the moment is 2.81, and you can get that from blender.org and you can download the latest version of Blender. When you install Blender, you will end up starting it up and you will end up with this screen here, and this is what's called the splash screen. Now Blender itself can look very intimidating, but that's why we're going to go step through step and learn how to use Blender and the interface itself. Now, if you guys notice that when the splash screen comes up, you have all of this stuff here on the left hand side, general 2D animation, sculpting and stuff. If you were working in Blender for specific stuff like animation and sculpting and all, you could pick these tabs which would quickly load you into a workspace with all of the stuff designed for it. Or if you're using the general tab, you can just use general and it'll put you into default scene. If you have been working on recent files, they will show up here. If you have no recent files here, then it'll probably be the first time you've opened up Blender, or you would have reinstalled Blender. So every time you open up a file, it will appear here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start off in a general scene. Okay, so I'm going to click general and it's going to log off the splash screen. And right now at the moment what I have here is I have my default cube, okay, which is highlighted here with the orange outline. So this is my default cube and this is my camera and this is my lamp over here. So the lamp is used for lighting up the scene in renders and also for baking textures. The camera is used for a viewport in render. It's also used in animations and stuff for camera tracking and stuff. And then the default cube is just a default cube that they throw in to fill out the scene. Now, when you first open Blender, it could be very confusing and very scary, and you look at it and you say to yourself, okay, well, what is everything and how do I use it? And the first thing to do is to crawl before you walk. Don't just jump straight into Blender and think that you're going to be, brilliant at it and that you're going to be modeling within the next 3 or 4 months, because you're not. It's going to take quite a lot of time and you got to get used to the basics first. So the bare basics of Blender is navigating around Blender itself, okay? So in order to rotate around objects, you hold your middle mouse wheel button in. So that's your scroll button on your mouse. You hold that in, and then when you move your mouse, you can actually cam around. So as you can see, you can actually rotate around, and that's how you rotate around in Blender when you want to rotate your view. Not the object, your view. So that's holding your middle mouse wheel button down and rotating around. If you also pull your mouse back or forward, you can go up to the top or down to the bottom. The second navigation tool is zoom in and zoom out. By rolling your mouse wheel back, you actually zoom out, and by rolling your mouse wheel in, you actually zoom forward into the object. This is good when you want to get close into an object and edit fine details. And zooming out is also very good when you're sculpting, because the further you zoom out, the better the sculpt you're going to get. Depending on the brushes and stuff you use, but that's a totally different topic anyway in itself. Now, to pan from side to side, you hold shift on your keyboard. So that's shift on your keyboard, hold your middle mouse wheel down, and now when you move your mouse from left to right, you actually see that now your object pans, your view pans across, I should say, or pans up and pans down. So hold middle mouse wheel button in, rotates around. Rolling mouse wheel button back or forward, zooms in and out, and holding shift and holding your mouse wheel button in will pan your camera pan your view from side to side. That's the basic navigations of Blender as far as the viewport goes. So as far as the viewport goes, that's the basic navigations. Because what you want to do is you want to get used to that. You want to actually keep going, and for about maybe 10 or 15 minutes play around with that, zoom out and zoom in and kind of hold it and zoom, cam around and stuff like that. And because you really need to get the hang of that, because that's what's going to start you off on being able to model. So being able to get around to one side and zoom in and, you know, kind of bring it up and various stuff like that, you know. So that's what's going to help you in modeling better, is once you get the hang of the viewport like that. So those keys again are: you hold the middle mouse wheel button in to rotate around your object, you run the middle mouse wheel back and forward to zoom in and out of your object, and you hold shift on your keyboard and your middle mouse wheel button in order to pan around, from side to side. Okay, so that's the basics of the viewport. So now what we're going to do is we're going to look at the basics of translating our object, which is basically moving, rotating and scale. Now there is shortcuts for everything in Blender, okay, and if there's not, you can set up specific shortcuts for yourself. In 2.81 you can actually set up shortcuts yourself. Now right now at the moment you have your default cube here, so if you look over here on the left hand side, now if you don't see this bar, it's probably because it's hidden. So press T on your keyboard, that's T on your keyboard, and that will hide or unhide that bar. So pressing T on your keyboard hide and unhides the bar. Now from this little tool panel we have a few stuff that we can use, and this changes depending on if you're in object mode or edit mode, and we'll go into edit mode in a second. But for object mode for the moment we have this here, which is the selection box. This allows us to draw a box around our object. So normally what we would do is we would actually, if you were to press B on your keyboard, you would actually get the bounding box. This now allows you to also select the box without pressing B. So if I was to highlight this and just hold left click on my mouse, as you can see now I can just draw a box around my object. And this is particularly good if I wanted to group a certain amount of objects. So as you can see, only the cube is highlighted at the moment. The light and the camera are not highlighted, but if I press B and I go across and I let go, or not B, sorry, left click, if I hold left click on my mouse and then let go, you see now that everything is selected. So this is good for when you want to select a certain group of vertices. If you're working on an object and you want to group a certain group of vertices or stuff like that, then that's very good for that. And that's what that does. It's the selection box, or you can also press B on your keyboard. The cursor is the 3D cursor, okay? So the 3D cursor is very, very important when modeling, because that is this little gimbal right in the middle here, okay? The 3D cursor is here, and this is where everything in the 3D space will spawn at. So for instance, as you can see, this 3D cursor is here. So if I was to take this cube here, okay, and I was to just delete it by pressing delete on my keyboard and deleting it, as you can see the 3D cursor is here. So if I was to add an object, okay, so I can add an object by pressing shift and A, which is the shortcut, or I can go add up here on the top menu, or shift and A, add mesh, and then if I was to add a cylinder, you will see that now the cylinder is in the same place because the 3D cursor is in the 3D view here, and that's where objects spawn in at. So if I selected this here, and now if I hold left click on my mouse, okay, if I hold on my left mouse button and if I drag this over, as you can see now the 3D cursor is starting to move. So I can move the 3D cursor to wherever I wanted. Now when I go and I press either shift A to add an object, or I press add and then mesh, if I say this time put in a UV sphere, it's going to go over where the 3D cursor is. The 3D cursor is very, very good for this, because if you were working on an object that had different fingers, or you know, say you're working on a human character and they had fingers and they had different joints and stuff like that, and you wanted to get to a specific joint, you could bring the 3D cursor to that joint. So for instance, say this was our character body here, and we wanted to actually bring, say, an arm here. So we're bringing this in right here, and then what we're doing is we're going and say we're adding our arm. So we add our cube for our arm. Now what we can do is we can start to manipulate this, and then as you can see, like, you know, now it's in the place that we wanted it. So for instance, this would be our arm, and as you can see now it's right at the side because we put the 3D cursor there. um, and that's what the 3D cursor is very good for. The 3D cursor actually allows us to put specific objects into our scene. Now, for us to be able to move our objects, okay, we can actually select our objects and we can press G on our keyboard. G will allow us to grab an object, okay? So by pressing G, we can grab an object. And if you notice now, we have specific axes here, okay? So we have, we have Y, X, and Z, okay? So we have X, which is along this axis. X is red. Y is green. I was going to say yellow there for some reason. I don't know why. Green. And, as you can see, X is blue. Okay, so X is blue. Green is Y. Z is blue. Green is Y, and X is Z, I should say. So yeah, so we have X, Y, Z, and they're represented as well by this gimbal over here. So you see Z is blue, Y is green, and X is red. So if you got confused in that little mistake I made there, now you know that you can look at it over here and say, I hadn't got it. I didn't know what he was talking about, but yeah. So this is what it is. So as you can see right now at the moment, we are actually selecting our object. Now we can move our object by pressing G, and once we press G, we have grab, so we're actually grabbing our object. Now we can press X, and it'll bring us on the X axis, Z and the Z axis, and Y on the Y axis. And this also is very good if you want to lock specific axes. So if you wanted something to be over in a certain place, so say this was going to be, this is going to be a cylinder, and it was going to be, say, a tower or something like that, and you had your tower and it was really big and you wanted at the back of your scene, you could just go G, Y, and you could move it back, and then you could go G and X, and then you could move it over there. So now it's at the back of your scene, and then you can build around it and stuff like that, Now, if you make a mistake with an object and you want to go back, you can press Control Z, and Control Z will actually bring it back a few steps. Now, Control Z works for quite a few steps, but after a certain amount of steps it stops. But in your preferences, you can search how to online. You can search in your preferences how to make it so that you can get 250 steps. So it goes back quite a long way. I won't be diving into the preferences at the moment because, as I said, it's 2.81 and it's constantly updating, so the preferences for me is a bit buggy at the moment, especially with my screencast software. So I won't be in the preferences itself, but you can search online for that. So as you can see, we've been able to move our object pressing G. So we press X, Y, and Z to move the specific axes. So now what we can do also as well from this bar is we can actually use this gimbal over here, which is the move tool, and we get the exact same thing. So we can now move it by just left clicking the little arrows and moving them to wherever we want. And again, you can lock it to the specific axes by pressing these little boxes here. You see we have red, green, and blue. So if we wanted to scale it to just X and Y, we would, or just Z and Y, we'd actually lock out this one, which was the Y axis. So as you can see, we can move it specifically to a certain place. So we can lock out the specific axes if we want as well through that. Again, what we can do is we can also manipulate our object by rotating. So if we press R on our keyboard, it'll allow us to rotate the object now. Again, if we wanted to rotate the object and we wanted to have it on a specific axis, again, we could do X for X, Y for Y, and Z for Z, and we could do the exact same thing as you can see there, we can cancel out the axes of it and then just rotate by moving our mouse around. Once we press R, we can rotate. And again, also, if you wanted to rotate it on the X 90 degrees, instead of moving our mouse, we could just press RX90 on our keyboard, and then that would give us 90 degrees. Now, if you look up on the top, up on the top on the right, on the left hand side, above the little bar that has all the tools on it, you'll see ROT 90 equals 90 along global X. That's telling us that we've rotated on 90 degrees, and you can see the numbers up there at the top as well on the left. If you look, you can see when I rotate it, the numbers change. So if you wanted it, so RX 90, and then you wanted it RY 20, well, Y is kind of, so RX 20, as you can see, you could actually rotate it like that. So you can press R on your keyboard to rotate, and then you can actually go and type in your number, or you can rotate it by eye. Same thing with the little buttons here. You can go and rotate it with this little button down here, and so underneath the move tool you have your little rotate gimbal, and you can do the exact same thing. And now what this is doing is this is rotating it on the axes as well, you see. So by doing that, you actually rotate it on the axes as well. Underneath that, we have our scale. So scale is where we actually scale up our object. To use scale, we actually press S on our keyboard. So we press S, as you can see, we can scale it out. We can press S, we can again lock it to specific axes. So there's our X, and there's our Y, and there's our Z. And we can just use this tool also, and we can actually do the exact same thing, you see. We can actually scale it down depending on what we want. Yeah, like that. And then again, what we can do is we can also go and lock it to specific axes like we done the last time. So we can actually go and click this here, and we can just have it go on X and Y. Here we'll only go on Y and Z, see. So you can actually play around with it, and you can actually get, you know, it's scaling on specific axes. And the last one underneath here that I want to talk about as well is the transform tool, okay? And this combines everything together. So if you're not used to using shortcuts, and you're not used to using you know, specific tools and stuff like that, just use this one, and then now you can just move it wherever you want. You can resize it and rotate it depending on what you want, you see. So you have the gimbal there, you have your scale, you have your rotate, and you have your move as well, you know. So as you see, you have all of your stuff there, and you know what you can do is you can actually go and you can actually move all of your various stuff in and scale and move around and stuff like that. Now, as you can see, our 3D cursor is over here. So when we go and add in an object, if we add in an object, it's going to add in obviously over where the 3D cursor is, you know. So I'm going to delete these for the moment. Now, in order for us to get our 3D cursor back to the center of the world, okay, all we need to do is we need to snap our cursor to you know, to the grid. So we basically need to snap our cursor to the center, and this can be done by going to object, and then it goes snap. And as you can see, we have our menu here, okay. So we go object, we go snap, and our menu here, selection to grid, selection to cursor. That's only if you have a selected a selection, which we go through in another video. But as you can see, we have down here cursor to selected, cursor to world origin, cursor to grid, cursor to active. So what we want is we want cursor to world origin, and as you can see, cursor to world origin, and the world origin is directly right dead center in the middle. So if this was ever brought off and you didn't know how to get it back and it was off over here somewhere, then all you do is just go to object, and then you go to snap, and then cursor to world origin, and it jumps right back into the middle. So in this video, what we've learned to do is we've learned to you know, zoom in and zoom out, rotate around our object, pan around an object. We've learned to rotate, scale, and move an object. We've learned how the basic transform tools. In the next video, what we're going to do is we're going to look into edit mode, and we're going to get talking about vertices and also about edges and faces, and how to manipulate an object from edit mode and just get a basic shape of an object itself. I do hope you like this video, guys. Make sure to drop a like and subscribe if you have not already. Also, if you have any questions, please do drop them in the comments and I will get them answered for you as soon as possible. Thank you for tuning in, guys. I'll catch you in the next video.